Let's face it, a really long, drawn-out lesson can be both painful to your child as they're sitting there trying to learn something and it's not going through because it's so boring.
It's so boring.
And it's making you sweat because you're thinking, what about all the things I need to get done and it's taking so long? This video will teach you how to reclaim hours of lost time and potentially weeks for you to enjoy doing something you actually want to do. The first one I have for you is something that gets me excited because it is just to skip lessons. That is right. So many homeschool curriculum, I would say most of them, if not all of them, have unnecessary lessons in them. Is that a really bad thing? Well, it is not always a bad thing because some children need a little bit more instruction and they like that repetition, and other kids are just way ahead of the 8 ball and can just skip so much of it. There are review lessons, things your child may have learnt in a previous year in a spiral-based course and they've already got it. In fact, they've got this year's material too. Perhaps you've taught that along the way. So make sure you skip the lessons your child doesn't need to do unless they're like, hey mum, I really want to do that lesson, and then that's okay. The trick again, which I say in so many of my videos, and which I say so often in the homeschool parenting program, is to get your child interested in learning. And so if they're not interested in it and they don't need to learn it, then just skip it. Okay, so my first point was to skip lessons. My second point is to skip busy work. So these might be in lessons your child is doing, but perhaps often they get to the end of the lesson and there might be a little review section which they just don't need to do because they've done it before. They don't need to review it because, hey, they know what 2 + 3 is. The third way to save time in your homeschool is to skip entire days. That is right, especially when children are young. Go for a 4-day homeschool week. Try to squeeze the academics into 5 days and you'll find things are so much more relaxing. You'll be able to do that easily, you find, in most cases, if you are skipping the busy work and you're skipping a lot of the reviews that the child just does not need to do. I've heard of a few curriculum at the moment and they actually make them with an impossible amount of things to do. The idea is to give the child so much things to do so that if they're incredibly advanced, it will suit them. But what a lot of homeschool parents don't realize when they do these curriculum is they think they have to do everything, and then it completely burns them out and they just send their kids back to school because they're like, I can't teach homeschool. How am I supposed to teach all of this? But in reality, it's not designed to all be taught for the most part. The fourth way to save time in your homeschool day is to get video lessons. I can't tell you how wonderful video lessons have been for us. I can just sit my child down when the computer and they've got their workbooks in front of them and the lady says, okay, open here, and the teacher just does the whole lesson with my child. I'm usually doing the folding in the background, or I'm making myself a cup of coffee, or I'm playing with my little 3-year-old Penny, and it's really wonderful. I feel like I've got all this time and my little boy is just loving these video lessons. So that's a really wonderful tip if you want to reclaim a lot of lost time in your day. I use BJU Press and I love their curriculum. They have offline teach it yourself options. So if you want to get the teacher's manual and do it yourself, you can do that. But you can use their video lessons, which I think are a bit of a lifesaver for busy homeschool parents. And I'll link BJU Press down below so you can check it out too. Now, my fifth tip kind of dovetails off my fourth tip, which was about getting video lessons, is that sometimes you can just skip the video lessons. Sometimes if the video lesson is going too long or your child already gets the concept, then you can just sit them down with the workbook and do a really quick workbook lesson that takes you 5 minutes instead of half an hour. If you feel like your child's going to really quickly get the concept and doesn't need a big long video lesson to teach them with, at the moment Luke's video lessons usually run between 15 to half an hour. If you feel like your child doesn't need that, then you can just skip that. Again, the best homeschools I find are the ones that are really customized. By the way, if you are loving this video, don't forget to give me a like and subscribe to the channel. I'm going to be giving you lots more tips and doing lots more curriculum reviews and just talking about lots of things that you're going to find really helpful. So make sure you hit that subscribe button for me. My 6th way for homeschool parents to save time is to outsource your homeschooling. How can you do that? Well, there are friends you can use, but sometimes they're busy with their own children. For example, they might be homeschooling their children and you say, hey, can my child do a bit of this with your child? Or can my child come over and do their workbooks with your child while I go and do something? So you can use friends. Grandparents, fantastic. Just say, hey, this is what they're supposed to be reading today. This is what you need to do. And they can sit down and do the lessons with the children. Especially if you're a 2nd generation homeschool parent, this is really great because your mom's already homeschooled you. She knows how to do it. And you're like, hey, they love the kids too. So you're like, hey, this will work well. So friends, grandparents, who else can you get? Well, there is also homeschool co-ops.
What is that?
So these are like big groups, kind of organized groups of homeschool parents who come together to teach lessons in a person's house or perhaps a community facility. And one parent might be really good at science. Maybe they studied science and they can do the science lessons for primary, middle school, or high school. So join a homeschool co-op. The 6th way you can save time in your homeschool is to change curriculum. Honestly, there are a lot of homeschool curriculum programs out there that take a lot more time than others. Some are really quick, and some you just give the curriculum to the child and the child does it themselves. So it doesn't even really take that much time out of your day. LifePack and Ace Paces are good examples of these. I'll link them down below so you can check them out if that interests you. They do tend to be a little bit less rigorous than curriculum that require teachers, but they can be a lifesaver in certain situations. We used Ace Paces in our homeschool 30 years ago, and I love the program, but it was quite easy, I will say that. Later on, we did switch to a harder program. We started using a Becker and Rodder staff, which tend to be a little bit more rigorous. Another way to save time in your homeschool is to teach your children to teach themselves. I talk a lot about this in my homeschool parenting program. It's like a homeschool 101 course for parents. And if you teach a person to fish, then they can get fish their entire life. If you teach a child to teach themselves, they will keep teaching themselves their entire life. I'm a good example of this. I was homeschooled myself and my parents just really encouraged a love of interest-based learning. So now when I'm like, oh, I find it fascinating. Oh, piano, I never learned that growing up. Oh, Latin, I never learned that growing up. I can do that now. And so now I love to teach myself, and I'm teaching myself Latin, and I'm teaching myself piano, and I'm loving it. How would this help you save time? Well, the child will be able to do things independently. They'll be able to tenaciously go after their own education, and they'll learn so much more because they're interested in the subject. If a child is bored to tears and it's textbook learning and they're thinking, oh, this is so boring, can you imagine actually how much is actually going through their brain at the time? Not much. Of course, if you have a big family and you are looking to save time, you can also not go wrong if you get a family-style homeschool curriculum. This means that you can sit down with your children and teach them all at the same time, and then they go off and do age-dependent assignments. Win-win. How can you find family-style homeschool curriculum? Don't worry, I've made a video about it right here.